I am calling the Diversion Board of Authority meeting to order. It's September 23rd, 2021. It is 3:31 p.m. Could I get a roll call, please?
Mayor Carlson?
Here.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mayor Dardis?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Here.
Mr. Emminger? Mr. Strand?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mrs. Sherling?
I'm here.
Mr. Steen?
Here.
Mr. Olson? Mr. Seldgevold?
Here.
Quorum is present.
Be done. Moving on to number 2, approval of minutes from the August 26, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve. Second, Campbell.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, I believe this is a voice call vote, so all in approver signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
You're opposed or?
It was a delay.
It was delay aye? Okay. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to number 3, approval of the order of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Steen, second.
Any further discussion? I believe this is also a voice call vote. I don't have it on my sheet, so I'm not sure. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the order of agenda is approved. Moving on to the consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Strand moves approval. Steen seconds.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Because these are a lot of reports, I will need to do a roll call vote. So could I get a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mayor Dardis?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Strand?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Seldgevold?
Aye.
That is everyone.
Thank you. The consent agenda has been approved, which is a lot of items on there. Moving on to our regular agenda, I turn it over to you, Mr. Paulson, for the Executive Director report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Just a few items here I'd like to talk to you about the activities of the authority over the last month and where we're going next month. A lot of activities have been occurring on the P3 side with the Red River Valley Alliance. We did have commercial close last month, as you know, and we're moving expeditiously towards financial close. Right now that is scheduled to occur on October 14th. So a lot of activity with our finance team and their finance team and going through all of the different bonding and financial arrangements. If any of you were at the finance committee yesterday, you heard Mr. Shockley talk about the activities that him and his consultants and his staff are working on, and it's quite fascinating. We also have been doing a lot of coordinating on the schedule and the permitting side with the Red River Valley Alliance, permitting with the DNR and the OSC, and getting those relationships started. We also have provided that limited notice to proceed for the Red River Valley Alliance. So they are here in town, they are establishing an office, and they are starting to conduct some utility surveys and property surveys as well. And so we do expect a lot more activity to just start ramping up from here on out with the anticipated start of construction next spring. As far as some of the authorities planning items, the board's aware we are bringing contingent of the board to Washington, D.C. Next week. It's quite excellent timing from all perspectives. The board's aware that the Congress is deliberating the infrastructure bill. We are anticipating that to be voted on potentially as early as next week while we're there. For the board's awareness, that bill does contain $11.5 billion of appropriation to the Corps' work account. Incidentally, just 2 days ago, the continuing resolution was passed by Congress that also contained an additional $3 billion in Corps appropriations for their civil works account, of which 1.5 billion of that would be available for infrastructure projects. The other 1.5 billion is going to Hurricane Irma cleanup. So that leaves us with about 13 billion of additional funding for the core work program, which is huge, considering their normal annual appropriations is around 2 to 3 billion per year. So I think that really gives us a lot of leverage while we're there, given the status of where we're at with the project. We're building it, it's under construction, and really it's that federal funding piece, because they are appropriating on a year-over-year basis. That is really kind of our biggest risk to keeping the program on schedule. We also have a lot of additional meetings scheduled with both federal delegations from Minnesota and North Dakota, as well as the Corps of Engineers, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army, and we are finalizing our OMB meeting as well. We've also been spending a lot of time this month working on the draft 2022 cash budget, and that was contained within your packet. I believe Mr. Dardis might have just a little to discuss and report from the Finance Committee yesterday, but certainly we'll take some time if there's any questions later in the meeting today. And then we are working on our next hire, which is the Director of Lands and Compliance, and those interviews were held with 3 finalists, and we are working through right now that selection process. A lot of ongoing coordination that our communications director and engineering director have been working on. Martin and I did attend a meeting with leadership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, St. Paul District, earlier in the month. And I felt that was a very advantageous meeting. We talked about scope transfer between the federal and the non-federal side, and quite a few other different just coordination items with the St. Paul District. We've also been doing a lot of coordination with Minnesota DNR on their permit conditions to get clarification for property owners and how we're going to be approaching some of that on the Minnesota side. And then, as you know, Mr. Bachigard has really been involved very intently on getting utility, township, and municipality MOUs, and there's a few of them in your packet for consideration here today. And then, of course, we've had John and the rest of the team, and myself included, continuing to work on provisions contained within the settlement agreement related to certain projects in Comstock, Georgetown, Christine, and then the cemeteries that are impacted by the upstream mitigation area. So with that, certainly free to answer any questions if the board has any or any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Are there any questions? Whoever's on the phone, if you can mute yourself, please, so we don't get a lot of background and feedback noise, that'd be fantastic. Any questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Paulson.
Thank you.
Moving on to General Counsel update. I will turn this over to you, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Diversion Authority Board. Before you have a resolution authorizing the execution of the number of documents that are necessary for the financial close. As the Executive Director had noted, we are scheduled to have financial close on October 14th. Just a reminder, financial close relates to the financial closing under the project agreement. So in mid-August, we had commercial close in which the parties signed off on the project agreement. And then between commercial close and financial close, the developer is assembling its financing, that it's bringing all of its private equity, its loans and bonds and different obligations to the table so that it can provide funds to start the construction of the project. As part of that, the financial team portion of the P3 has been working a lot regarding the issuance of the PABS bonds and assisting and reviewing the developer's financing. The resolution authorizes a number of things. The first is the continuing disclosure undertaking. Most of the entities that you're a board member of have bond issues and other debt obligations in which you have continuing reporting requirements and disclosure requirements regarding those bonds. Even though the authority is not necessarily a party to the developer's financing, as part of that financing, there's certain disclosures that need to be done with banks, bondholders, and other institutions. And so we have some limited continuing disclosure obligations. The second item is the lender's direct agreement. You've previously approved the form of the lender's direct agreement as part of the master indenture of trust. That is the agreement that sits between the master indenture of trust or the diversion authority and then the developer's financing. So kind of think about it as the center of the spider web, if you would. It's where money goes in on one side and it comes out on the other side and goes over to the developer's side of the transaction. And then the final item is a small amendment to the project agreement. We have been working with the developer regarding potential savings in their financial model. When we reached commercial close, we had the financial model they had submitted with their bid that became part of the project agreement. This amendment will incorporate that new financial model, which will slightly change the availability payments for the non-flood control elements along with the flood control elements of the project. So that gets substituted into the project agreement. And then there's one minor change to one of the technical requirements. And so this authorizes the chair and the executive director to go ahead and sign those closing documents as part of the P3 transaction. I expect that the financial close will be very similar to the commercial close, and that'll be ongoing most of the day on the 14th. And at some point later in the evening on the 14th, we'll be able to declare that we've reached financial close. So happy to answer any questions. We went into a little bit more detail at the Finance Committee meeting yesterday, but happy to answer any questions about the process.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Are there any questions in regards to the financial close authorization? Anyone on the phone? All right, hearing none, I would look forward to a motion for this resolution.
I move for its approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or any discussion? Hearing none, why don't we do a roll call vote with this one, please, Don?
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mayor Dardis,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Strand,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Shirlene,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Salzvold.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. And the resolution passes. Mr. Shockley?
I did want to provide one other good piece of news to the board. The developer's financing for the project, which includes their private equity, their loan, the taxable bonds, and then the PABS, US DOT PABS bonds, have been qualified by a third-party reviewing agency as what is referred to as green bonds. Green bonds are bonds that are sought after by investors who are looking for projects that meet certain criteria related to environment, to reducing carbon footprint, to providing really resiliency and protection to a community. The interest savings on a bond issue or private financing with green qualification is generally between 6 to 8 basis points. And so it's not a huge amount, but given the financing is close to $1 billion, 68 basis points does add up, and that savings as a result gets transferred to the authority. And so those are some of the changes that occur in the financial model. So just thought you might find that interesting that it did receive the green bond qualification, and that's qualification and opinion is provided by an independent third party. And when that opinion's finalized, it gets finalized at bond closing. Can certainly provide a copy to the board if anybody's interested in reading it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. All right, moving on to U.S. Army Corps project update. Is Terry Williams on the line? Or are you going to be providing that, Chris?
Yeah, Terry sends her regrets. She had something come up today, so isn't able to join us. So I'll give a quick update. Just a couple of probably things to note. in general, construction's progressing very well on all 4 of the core projects. One thing you maybe saw in the paper this week, they are getting close to switching traffic over onto the new bypass. That'll initially be head-to-head, and then within the next month or so, they'll switch that to traffic flowing 2 ways with 4 lanes, 2 in each direction for the duration of the project until they start staging back. So that's moving well as well. Probably the biggest update to give is just as we step into the Corps' new fiscal year here in a month or so, they've got 4 projects that they're looking to put out to bid and award here in the next few months. Those include the Red River structure, which they have their design complete, so we're just waiting for final permits, final funding authorizations, and we'll start the process to bid and award that. Drayton Dam, which we're working on final plans now, and those should be done here within the next month. Drain 27 also has the design complete, so right now we're again just waiting on final permits, final coordination with the Corps, and another segment of the Southern Embankments, SE2A, is scheduled to be completed in November. So nice progress being made on the core program, and again looking forward. So by next summer, likely we'll have 8 core segments under construction and moving forward. So with that, if there's any questions on any of the other projects, I can certainly try to help answer those as well.
Thank you, Mr. Brockegard. Any questions? How about for anybody on the phone? All right, hearing none, moving on to number 7, public outreach update.
No, he's not, but there was no meeting. I don't know.
Okay. Jennifer, did you have an update with public outreach? It's my understanding they did not meet this month.
Correct. We did not meet this month. We've put a lot of effort into finishing the preparation of the crisis plan and the communications plan that we must have in place for that P3 partnership. So we have a few more weeks until it's actually due, but the beginning of next week is blocked to just review that finalized plan. Then it will be shared with you all to just take a final look at it before we submit it for the vendor.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions of Jennifer? Hearing none, thank you so much.
Okay.
Look forward to seeing that. Moving on to land management updates. I will turn that over to Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you. We did not meet yesterday. The report is in your packet. Colors keep changing. I know they're very busy. Is there any of the staff that wanted to say anything in particular? Otherwise, I think I've got Roger on the phone. If you had any update, Roger Olson?
I don't think he's on.
He's not on? Oh, well, then I've got Commissioner Campbell. Surely you have something to say.
I do. So I'm going to go back and give a little report both on our August meeting as well as the meeting that we had earlier today. In August, we did approve 4 appraisals and 2 replacement housing differential payments. We also talked some about the Minnesota DNR permit conditions, and we got an update on the intent to have additional land meetings with property owners to keep them informed on those permit conditions. There's been some questions on the part of some of our landowners. In September, we approved 4 appraisals and 1 replacement housing differential payment. We had some discussion about the environmental monitoring easements and the new action plan, which we took we approved 2 processes today, and that was to coincide with what the Cass County Joint Resource District has done as well. The first one was just modifying some of the language in the easements that kind of allows for more specificity regarding the timing of the day that those might occur. I think there was some issues. Landowners had some concerns about when that would be done, and that was all brought forward and approved by the Corps. That language information was approved, and so we adopted that change today. And also regarding the payments on the environmental monitoring easements, and we did discuss and approve some changes to those. And part of what our thoughts were there is that, and this can go to, I think, Mr. Dardis has talked about it in a lot of our meetings regarding the legal costs associated with eminent domain, and how by maybe doing some of these things, we're going to be able to acquire more of these easements with some adjustments on these payments that will be far less expensive than going that other route. And I believe the Cass County Joint Water Resource District also approved that. So, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
And that's everything. Again, the rest of the information is in your packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Shirley and Commissioner Campbell. All right. Any questions or comments from anyone in regards to land management updates? All right, hearing none, moving on to finance update, and I will turn this over to you, Mayor Dardis.
Thank you, Mayor Carlson. Finance Committee did meet yesterday. We had a number of action items that we did. We had some contracting items, 3 of them that we dealt with, and also a number of MOUs and agreement actions that took place that Mr. Shockley had presented to us. One of the items that you'll all note in your packet is that you do have the draft budget, cash budget, and that is only a draft. And so at this time, if there are any questions or comments or whatever, we'd certainly entertain that. One of the most interesting to me was in the very first line item up there, and that deals with Burlington Northern Santa Fe and the bridges that we have to construct for their crossings. And so Paul did a wonderful job of explaining how that works and how the maintenance and operation going forward on how Burlington Northern Santa Fe likes to deal with that. But again, it's a working document. Just prior to this meeting today, Paul and I and Rick Steen, we had a brief meeting, and we had talked yesterday during the Finance Committee meeting that we would be having an extended discussion on some of the payment process and moving forward with the fact that we have our P3 developer. We've rethought that a little bit because some of those discussions and some of that explanation of how the process might work will include Mr. Paulson, Mr. Shockley, and Paul Barthel. And so we're probably going to have a working lunch prior to the Finance Committee meeting where we'll invite you to be in person or virtually, because the advice to me is that of the 4 line items that we have outlined, they'll each take about 20 minutes, and we don't want to infringe on the Finance Committee at another finance meeting. It's going to get too long. So we'll try and accommodate prior to. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor Dardis. Questions in regards to draft catch 2022 cash budget or the other information mentioned by Mayor Dardis? Commissioner Campbell.
Do we have a time period in mind where we do establish the final budget?
I'm not sure.
That's above my pay grade.
Director Paulson.
There is a time in the written into the JPA for the draft budget. I assume you're referring to the draft budget. And so it does need to be approved at the next meeting in November, I believe. So the draft budget is required under the JPA to be presented in October, I believe. So so I think we could have actually a couple months. I think it needs to be approved in November. So.
Does the draft budget ever become a permanent budget, or is it always draft form?
It'll be draft until it gets approved by the board.
And that's what my question was.
Yeah.
When is the final budget approval process done for the following year?
We are anticipating bringing a final budget to the board next month. And so I think that Chairman Dardis would like the board members to reach out to either myself or himself over the course of the next month if they have questions on the draft budget. And I'm certainly available to sit down at any time and go through in detail. It is a lot of information, as the board knows. We have over 4,000 lines of data in our budget. So We can dig down as deep as anybody would like to go, but it would certainly take more time than we have available to us today at the meeting.
Commissioner Steen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, Joel, I think you said that the final is due in November, though, correct?
I believe so.
So if we have to skip finalizing or approving the final budget next month, we have until November.
That's correct. That's why we wanted to bring it forward a month ahead of requirements so that we had some time in case there were some additional changes that were necessary. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? How about for anybody on the phone?
And Madam Chair, I just have a comment to make on the budget. It's going to be very similar to this last year's budget, this 21 budget. So we do not anticipate starting to make any sort of milestone payments or buildable unit payments to the developer, because those payments are complete after pieces of infrastructure are already in the ground and completed and approved. So most of our resources are going into, again, lands, the City of Fargo in-town projects, and then project management and engineering fees, as well as utility relocates. So it's very similar budget to what we are anticipating to expend this year. As the board knows, our budget was about $230 million this year. We're expecting to expend about $170 million. And that's pretty much in line with what the draft budget is here, as you'll notice. A lot of the same activities. So very similar year next year to 21.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Again, if you come up with or develop further questions, please contact Executive Director Paulson or Mayor Dartis. So, moving on to number 10, other business. And again, turning that over to you, Mr. Paulson, for the org chart for existing and proposed positions.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Just a little bit of history. When I came on board in September of 2018, I did put together an organizational chart and presented that to the board. Since that time period, we've been filling those positions. Basically, what you see in front of you in the dark blue was what has been approved by the board and what has been incorporated into our administrative budget that has also been approved by the board. We do anticipate to fill the lands director position next month and the finance director position the month after that. So that would conclude the remaining open positions that the board has approved. One of the things that John and I have done through the Master Indenture of Trust is we have capped the administrative budget at a set amount, and that amount is $1.6 million. That's intended to support all of the positions that will keep the lights on at the Diversion Authority that would be necessary to complete the proper transactions to continue to keep the authority moving. And that was basically formulated off of those dark blue positions. So those that we're anticipating, they're necessary. We need them no matter what. The new positions that I wanted to present for the board today are in the light blue, and they really support roles for the implementation of the project or the construction of the project. And these roles, if they were not contained in a public staffing perspective, they would be private consultants that would need to provide those resources to the directors in order for the directors to be effective. And so what we're really doing here is we're transitioning project budget that has been allocated to consultants over and allocating it to public positions that would sit in the office with the directors and support them in their roles. So I did meet with Chris and I met with Jennifer and we determined some sufficient full-time equivalent staff members that would be necessary to support them. Right now, because we don't have a finance director and all of the finance director positions are being completed by consultants, I did plug in one support position for the finance director. When we bring that individual on board, I would like to investigate further what their perspectives would be for our needs for that individual. And Chris and I and Jennifer also sat down and we talked about the lands director as well. And we did identify a couple of unique positions under the lands director that we feel very comfortable with. that are necessary to support that director role as well. And then you'll see there's an additional administrative assistant and a project manager that would be dedicated to support the 4 directors in their roles and responsibilities. So again, those those light blue positions would not be contained within the administrative budget, but they would be contained within the project budget, and they are filling roles that would otherwise be supported by those directors by consultants. And so I wanted to bring it to the board, get any comments or feedback. I think after we get the lands director and the finance director, we would be, if the board approved this structure, looking at starting to advertise those support positions and bring those people on board as quick as we could. So I'll just open it up for any questions or comments. One more just caveat. I did include an overall structure of the entire diversion authority, so you can see all of the consultants that are working below this as well in the preceding pages. I just went through and counted, we have over 150 positions that are filled right now with consultants that are supporting the diversion authority. And right now, I think we all feel that the best positions to bring in-house are the ones that you're seeing in the light blue colors there. And really kind of create that team environment for the authority and provide that day-to-day support in the office for the roles of our directors.
Thank you. Mr. Paulson, Commissioner Peppercorn.
I have a question. So you mentioned that this wouldn't be part of the administrative budget. Why would that be separate?
The administrative budget was contemplated to be in perpetuity, Commissioner Pepcorn, so even after the construction of this project. What you're seeing in the light blue are really just construction project related roles. So after the authority constructs the project and it's complete, you still will have the positions in the dark blue because they'll be necessary for O&M functions, financial functions. They may change somewhat, but they're still going to be necessary to keep the lights on at the authority during the operation and maintenance period. But the positions in the dark blue would end at the end of construction, much like if they
Mr.
were
Paulson,
being provided by consultants. So.
The light blue, the positions in the light blue.
Light blue. Sorry, did I say dark blue? Apologize for that. Light blue. And so that's why we're supporting them under the utilizing the project budget, because really it's just budget that we already had allocated for positions. This actually saves the authority money by staffing these positions in-house versus having a consultant do the role. Traditionally, consultants will multiply an annual salary by anywhere between 3 and 4 times. And so, I did do somewhat of an analysis of where these salary ranges would come in for the light blue positions. And you're probably saving anywhere between $1.5 to $2 million a year by bringing these in-house under the authority versus consulting them out through contracts.
Mayor Dardis.
Mr. Paulson, do you have, with the number of hires that you're going to have, do you have in which calendar years you think that they'll be brought on? Or are you anticipating all of this next year because of, we have our P3 developer?
Thank you, Chairman Dardis. Yes, these positions would be allocated to be filled in 2022.
2022, all of them?
Yes, that's correct.
And I would very much like to see your calculations on what you think the salary ranges are prior to our next meeting with the Finance Committee.
Absolutely.
Share them with Mr. Steen also and any other members of the Finance Committee that would like to have them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Mayor Dardis, I did just the back of the napkin, right? What we do formally for positions that have been approved by the board is we do have a salary consultant that determines the salary ranges, but I'll bring what my best guess is forward so you can see what those calculations look like.
That'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Any further questions? Mayor Mahoney.
Yeah, with the growth of your staff, is the building for the diversion team going to be completed by next year?
Great question, Mayor Mahoney. No, it is scheduled to be completed, I believe, in 2024, end of 2024. And so you bring up a good point. We have been looking at different options to house the authority because the current civic center, the way it's leased right now, is not large enough to support all of these positions. Incidentally, we have had just very preliminary conversations with the Red River Valley Alliance. The office building that they have leased is a large office building that would allow some partitions within the building between the authority and the Red River Valley Alliance. We are already planning, and we've written into the requirements of the contract that Jacob's staff devoted to the P3 will cohabitate with the Red River Valley Alliance in this building. So there's some just thought that we could also bring the authority administration into that building, and all three entities would be able to be under one roof. I think there's a lot of efficiencies. I did talk to Andrew Dobson about the idea. He is our Jacobs employee that is leading the P3, and he's been a part of a number of other P3 projects around the world. He thought it was an excellent idea anytime you can get everybody under one roof, working together on a day-to-day basis, with the exception of having some level of partition, because that's going to be necessary. We won't be working in the same direct office space, but we'll have contact and the ability to just walk, through a partition over to the Red River Valley Alliance's side. So that's one concept we're thinking. Nothing formally to bring forward. We're also looking at additional spaces downtown and within the public entities that might fit as well for the size of the staff.
So with the only detriment being it's in West Fargo, you might consider not building a building? Could it ultimately happen?
I think the building is intended to be the long-term home for the authority, because this project office will go away once the Red River Valley Alliance is completed with their construction operations. They'll probably be looking for a long-term home too, for just the O&M staff that they leave behind. So that was really the intent of the DA administrative offices. I would anticipate, though, in 2024, when that building is done, the administration would move into that new building at that time anyway. So,
Commissioner Steen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, Joel, to clarify, so when we see this structure, it's contemplated that these positions will be approved in conjunction with the approval of the 22 budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? How about for anybody on the phone? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Moving on to policy development.
Is he requesting this be approved?
I'm not requesting this to be approved, but we would like to include this in the project budget for 2022. So if the board has any exceptions with this or wants to see some changes, we would need to know that prior to approving the forecast year 22 draft budget. So this is the first time I'm presenting it, so it's more of for your information at this point. But like the draft 22 budget, if any of you would like to sit down and talk about this in more depth or go into any more details prior to the November approval of the draft budget, that would be appreciated.
I just want to clarify that at some point in time, this organizational chart will be approved by this board.
That's correct. Yep. It would be. It can be presented in the November along with the draft budget as well.
Thank you.
Mayor Dardis.
Mr. Paulson, in your analysis and the analytics of this, do you also have a cause and effect that when these individuals are hired, a line item as to how it affects what we're paying our consultants then? So there's a cause and effect that if we do this, this, and this, then the value of the consultants and the team that they've got hired obviously has to go down. So there has to be some analytics to the process. And if you could guide us through that, that would be greatly appreciated as far as the Finance Committee goes.
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor Dardis, and I think we could lay that out pretty easy. We did do that exercise with you and Commissioner Steen in relation to the lands director, and I think you saw the direct savings, but we can quantify that and we can lay it out in an easy to read format so that the board can see, where the value is for hiring these specific staff members.
You did a nice job with that verbally, but we need some optics for the rest of the people that aren't engaged on an everyday basis with this. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, moving on to Policy Development Working Group. Joel, were you going to take that, or did you want?
I can take that if you'd like me to, and you can add if you'd like, Chairwoman Carlson. So we, the board, as you know, we had our board retreat and we talked about just board governance. One of the resulting action items that came out of that was the discussion about a governance working group. Basically, this working group would be a group that could look at board level policies and policies related to the board and the executive director, and really kind of add on to what we have within the JPA and provide more specificity of what roles and responsibilities are. And so I bring it forward for discussion because I think that was the board's wishes to have just a general discussion about this governance working group. Would not be a committee, it would not be a quorum, but it would be a group of board members that could get involved in the discussions of what specifically those policies might look like. And that group could then, through me, I could bring those to the board for approval, implementation, those sorts of things. I think the thought was to continue to use Mr. Schatz to help facilitate that as well, and I have reached out to him and he is willing to do that. So I think this is more kind of a discussion item for the board now, and if you would like to move forward and get that moving. So.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Just to follow up a little bit with that, first of all, I wanted to extend my appreciation and gratefulness for everybody adjusting their schedules for being able to participate in the board retreat on September 1st. I really felt it was somewhat of a miracle that we had all 13 members there at the same place at the same time to actually have some pretty worthwhile discussions for 4 hours, which was, again, pretty incredible. A lot of great discussion came out of that. One was the development of a policy working group, which will be comprised of members from each of the governmental entities, and also Commissioner Olson will be part of that also. And we, like Mr. Paulson said, are going to be working on a number of different policies that really is going to help move us forward and transition us into a project that is going to be monitoring the P3 and everything moving forward for the next 30 years. So this is more of a kind of an informal head nod that we're going to move forward with this, contracting with Dr. Schatz again to assist us in providing some kind of framework in which to move forward. So kind of a FYI for everyone in the public that we are going to be moving and working towards that. Any
Do you need an action on that? Do we have to move to approve that?
Don't believe that we have to move to approve it. It was more of a put it on the agenda to make sure that everybody is aware of what we're doing and how we're moving forward. Commissioner Strand.
Thank you. I'm entirely on board to continue that process and evolve our governance model. My thinking is, and I'm not real particularly aware of how things work with the chairman call, but my desire would be to have us evolve and create and breathe life into an executive committee and have, I would expect, somewhat of a phasing out of the chairman's call and replace that with the executive committee. Maybe I'm not correct about that, but that's where I'm kind of thinking it's going.
Commissioner Strand, yes. Yes, it's truly an evolution that doesn't happen overnight. Took you guys I think, 12, 13 years to get to this point, which is incredible. The amount of work that's been put into this project, and here we are now, and we need to transition and move forward. So those will definitely be items on the agenda for the policy development working group. Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you. And do I understand that Dr. Schatz will also be surveying the group for further input?
Correct. Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. All right, any further questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Mr. Paulson.
Thank you.
So moving on, our next meeting will be held on October 28th, 2021. And I look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second.
All right. And we are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.